Hey, welcome to the first podcast of MedProPrep. I'm Adish,
I'm Adish.
and we're going to be talking a little bit about ourselves, kind of like what led us to this point, what MedProPrep is about, what our goals are, and kind of where we want to go with this podcast. So yeah, go ahead, Adish. Sorry,
Yeah.
you can cut it out,
So
right?
I think the first question that everyone's probably wondering, and good question to ask, is just what is MedProPrep, and just give a little snippet about what we're doing here.
Yeah, so basically, so MedProPrep was, I guess, kind of informally started back in 2018. Um, I was doing my med school interviews and I had a peer of mine who was applying to different places and asked me for some interview prep advice. And I was like, okay, let's talk about it and see what we can do. I had basically done different courses, gone through multiple books, interview books, and also just experimented with what works for me. And so I prepped him, talked to him, used whatever knowledge I had. And then he actually was also applying to my program, but was out of state. Actually, both mine and Adisha's program, but he was out of state. So he's from a completely different applicant pool. So I was like, yeah, I don't care to help you. And so I prepped him. Unfortunately, he didn't get into our program, but he got into even a more difficult program to get acceptance into, which is the Rice Baylor program. They only accept 4 to 8 students per year. And that kind of founded the idea of, oh, wait, like this kind of works. And so then, fast forward a couple of years, I start helping different students. I keep getting more medical students in, and then me and Adish talk together. We were roommates, and we go to the same medical school about, hey, how can we make this a solidified idea? How can we make this a program that has a clear structure definition that can be applicable for anyone who does it? And then that basically we talked about that back in 2020, worked on that together, started MedProPrep officially. I believe it was the end of December or the beginning of January of 2020. Um, and then we haven't stopped since. We've had close to, I believe it's close to 25 or 30 students now. And we've gotten every single student in. So that's kind of where we're at with MedProPrep, kind of where we're headed is okay, our strategies work, the way we interview and prep all of our students have worked 100% of the time, and we want to be able to share this with more students, get more students involved, get more students into medical school, not make it seem like it's such a hard I guess burden or hard hurdle to get over is the medical school interview, because obviously some people have to like once, twice, thrice to get into medical school. And we kind of, our goal is to essentially take away the mystery of, oh, yeah, how do you do a medical school interview? As well as like what is needed in an application. And that's kind of how, MedPro Prep, where we're at right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, definitely been growing throughout the years, but I guess the next question probably everybody is wondering, just me and you, like what's your kind of background, and who are you kind of, and where are you in the medical school process and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously I'm Adish Mishra. I'm Adish one unofficially, and you're Adish two.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I grew up in a small town in southeast Missouri on a farm. I think I somewhere in our MedPro prep, like our bio, you can read about that. But basically grew up in rural Missouri. I got interested in medicine when I was in my junior year of high school. I'm first generation med school applicant and going to be a first generation doctor, also first generation immigrant. My parents immigrated over from India. Um, so grew up on a farm and was looking into med school programs and found UMKC, and they have a 6 year accelerated combined program. So basically the benefit of the program that I essentially chose at the end of the day was I was, like looking at a bunch of different places, but UMKC stood out to me because of three reasons essentially. A was right out of high school. You start the medical school, you get acceptance already into the medical school. and you don't have to take the MCAT. That was another big thing for me. And probably the biggest thing that sold me was the price, because I was an in-state applicant. So the price of me going 6 years was significantly less than any other school. So, I applied, got interviews, interviewed at UMKC, waited a couple weeks, got accepted, and ended up going to UMKC, which is where I obviously met you. Um, and then kind of how my journey in med school has been so far. So, uh, I started med school a lot differently than I feel like a lot of my peers, because there's obviously like the burden of the financial part of medical school. My first 2 years of medical school, I worked as a cashier, and I also worked different jobs, and I took loans. But basically, my goal going into medical school to pay for medical school was, okay, I need to find a way that I can cover the majority of our school, because the way our 6 year program works is you do most of your undergrad work in the first year and a half, and then the next 4 years you're just doing medical school curriculum. So I needed to find a way to be able to pay for school, as well as have a way to just live and pay rent and have money for finances and food and stuff, because it's pretty tiring working a job and also doing an accelerated program. I remember, especially my second semester, I would get done with school, and then I would go at like 2 p.m. and work till 10 p.m. at a grocery store here, and then get off and just be completely exhausted. And so that wasn't going to work. So I looked into different scholarship programs. I initially came into the program actually with a rural scholarship. Um, that was a full ride, but the problem with that program was they needed a certain number of hours, and I just couldn't fulfill it, because obviously medical school, it's a lot of time commitment, and I just couldn't get in. It was a couple hundred hours you have to get in to keep the scholarship. So I had the scholarship my first year of medical school. Then my second year was when I took a significant loan, and I was like, okay, I got to do something. And additionally, another big thing was I couldn't get certain loans based on me needing a cosigner. So couldn't get a cosigner. So wasn't able to get a lot of medical school loans that most of my peers were able to get. So then I looked at, okay, let's look at what other options we have. Another part of my background, all my grandparents were in the military. They're in the Indian Army. And so I always heard about, serving, and also how it can be a great thing to, be able to do something for your country, but at the same time, help yourself and get an education, et cetera, et cetera. Basically everything a recruiter tells you. And so I applied to this scholarship program called Health Profession Scholarship Program through two branches of the military, through Army and Navy. I couldn't apply to Air Force, unfortunately, because I didn't have a MCAT score, and they wanted me to take an MCAT, and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm already taking med school
Yeah.
curriculum. I don't have time to study or take an MCAT. So I applied to those two branches. Thankfully, I was blessed to get accepted to both of them. And at the end of the day, chose the Navy, because I kind of wanted to be able to travel more. I like the ocean. I like the whole aspect of, you get to see a bunch of different places, especially Southeast Asia, because obviously that's where my parents are from. Um, and then some of the experience I had while I was being recruited for the Navy kind of made me choose the Navy. So got accepted to that program. And what that program essentially allows you to do is you don't pay for any medical school. So they pay for all of your medical school tuition. There is also certain loans. It's kind of tricky because, like, for example, the scholarship won't cover UWorld, but it will cover medical school books. So there's like certain things that you still have to pay kind of out of pocket for. So, but it's a huge chunk, obviously. I mean, you don't have to pay tuition. Then the other great thing about it is it's around $2,000 to $2,200 they give you each month as a stipend, which is huge, because essentially the way the program works is you pick your length of contract. So I obviously chose 4 years because I needed to have all 4 years of medical school paid for. So I picked the 4 year contract, and then um, they pay for all your medical school, pay your tuition, give you your stipend, and you go to officer candidate school, usually around your M2 or M3 year. And then you go to residency. Then right after residency, uh, that's kind of how my track works. Is I'll have 4 years of service. So I'll be serving as an officer, and I'll also be serving as a military physician for the Navy. So that's kind of how that track works. I've heard of people also, you can do it basically like you do your med school, then you go do your service, and then you can go do your residency. But I kind of just want to do my residency first, and most people choose that track anyways. And so that's basically how I've been able to pay for medical school. And then something else I decided to do this past year is, so I finished my M3 year, which would have been my 5th out of 6 years in the program, took step 2, got everything taken care of there. I decided to get an MBA as well. So the way that works for our program is, so it's already an accelerated 6 year program just this past year. And it's kind of funny because I always wanted to get one. I just didn't know when I would get one. And I found out through one of my attendings that, hey, UMKC, we started a combined MD MBA program that you basically tack on 1 year and you get an MBA out of it. And I was like, well, that's awesome. Like, why wouldn't I try to apply to it, see if I get in and go from there? And so I applied to the program. I believe that was like May or June of 2022, found out in July, started the program in August. I'm about halfway through, and the beauty of this MBA program is you can get a healthcare certificate, which I will be pursuing, and also you finish your MBA in 1 year. Typically, MBA programs take 4 semesters, but because it's an integrated program with the medical school, I'm able to just do 30 credits, so 15 credits this semester, 15 credits next semester. And then basically I'm pushing my graduation, which originally was 2024, to 2025. And so that's basically the newest thing that's been happening. So and I also there's a lot of different roles. Obviously, me and Adish both run MedProPrep. We help interview students. Additionally, with me doing the MBA, the military unfortunately was like, hey, that's fine, we're all for it, like, we support you doing that, but we can't pay for your tuition or give you a stipend for that year because you already have a 4 year contract. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to need to find a job. So I've also been working as it's called a patient care technician. Essentially, it's similar to an MA at orthopedic clinic. Soon I'll be, hopefully working as a project coordinator or project manager. That's essentially where I'm headed to for the next 6 to 7 months after this job. And then I'll be doing my officer candidate school, then, applying for residency. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. And then kind of what I'm interested in is it's called PM&R, physical medicine and rehabilitation. I also want to get a fellowship eventually, maybe in cardiopulmonary rehabilitation. I also really like interventional spine procedures as well as pain medicine. So there's a lot of different things you can do with PM&R. Kind of drew towards it. A lot of it has to do with my parents too. They're both occupational therapists. So I grew up in the rehab world, kind of figured out a way, which I'll talk about at some point, like why I chose PM&R and how I got there. But essentially that's where I'm at. That's kind of where I'm going with my future at this point. Yeah, what about you, Adish?
It's a pretty cool story. Lots of twists and turns, I guess, so to say. I
Yeah.
guess mine's like pretty, I guess, to simply describe it, I guess. I like moved around a lot as a child. I guess I moved from like Chicago to Indianapolis to Ohio, then to Springfield, Missouri, which is kind of like, I wouldn't say it's a small town, but it's like a medium-sized town that most people probably don't know about. But I kind of grew up there for the most part, and I got interested in medicine. My parents are both doctors, so kind of came from
Mhm.
that, as well as just shadowing in the hospital, through, I'm sure, things that you guys who are listening have all done through like medical explorers and various programs at the hospital where
Oh,
you get
no
to
way. I did
shadow.
medical explorers too. That's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I think like everyone who does medicine pretty much does it. So
Yeah.
just like kind of explored through that and found out that I like medicine, and then applied to a bunch of colleges. Got into a couple, but just I guess the highlight of UMKC versus other ones, just to speak on it a little bit, because I know most of you who are probably watching are wondering like why UMKC. I think the big thing is, as Adish said, kind of no MCAT. Obviously, the cost in the end is a lot less than going to a normal college usually, and then going into medical school. And then also just the fact that you have like kind of a guarantee is, I think, kind of priceless in a way, in terms of if you want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think if you guys are
Yeah.
talking to us about like potential plans, I think obviously each case is individual, and I don't want to give like standard advice to anybody. But if you just want to be like a clinical practitioner and a clinical doctor, I mean, I think UMKC is a great program for that. I think you'd agree with that, wouldn't you, Adish?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, and then I guess from there, I've kind of known I've wanted to do like medicine my entire life, and that led me to like pretty much once I got into medical school, I wanted to do internal medicine, and I knew that like hospital work was something that I liked. So that kind of drew me towards internal medicine, and currently, after obviously a couple years of medical school, now I'm taking a gap year, I guess you could say, just like Adisha's, except kind of for a different degree. It's essentially a degree here at WashU, called a master's degree in translational and investigational research. So basically, kind of a base, I like to tell people, a degree in research. I'm just kind of learning how to conduct clinical research, clinical trials, and things of that nature. Hopefully, potentially to like better position myself to do research in the future. It's through a program through the NIH that like pays a stipend, and you get to live, and go to WashU for school, as well as kind of conduct your research basically kind of as a job, and kind of help a principal investigator, which is just kind of like the head doctor, so to say, kind of perform their research. And so my specific research is in pulmonary hypertension, which is something I'm interested in for sure, as it kind of involves the heart and lungs as well. And those systems are pretty interesting to me. So just kind of exploring that. But overall, I think me and Adish are pretty similar in that like we'll both apply for residency next year and kind of see where that gets us. Obviously, I'm not in like the military program, so I don't have to serve after residency,
Yeah.
but it's just I'll just be taking a job probably somewhere and working as a doctor. But it's just going to be, yeah, we're pretty much on the same path in terms of, you know, what we have. And so I think just looking at our two paths, we've had very different paths, but also there's a lot of similarities. But I think it allows you guys who are listening to really extract some value from this. And like there's a lot of ways to get through medicine, and each person kind of
Hmm.
has their own unique story, but there's certain things that kind of stay the same. If you go to UMKC, if you go to any program, that you're going to have to think about, you're going to think about like how are you going to pay for school? You're going to have to think about like what do you want to do after school? You're going to have to think about, do I want to take like an extra year to like make my application better? Is that something I want to do? And then when getting into medical school, it's like, do you have the qualifications? Do you think you want it at 18? Do you not know for
Hmm.
sure? And I think that's what makes us in a way qualified for this, because we've interviewed for various scholarships for various things, throughout our like medical career, and even before medicine, before we got into medical school,
Yeah.
that it makes us, we've gone through a lot of interviews and we understand how they kind of work, I think, pretty well.
Yeah. And I think like the reason me and Adish, obviously we've been doing MedPro Prep for a little bit, but a big part of us wanting to start doing YouTube and start doing, podcasts and kind of talking to, whoever's listening out there
Yeah.
about this is because we've done so many different things that I want to share this experience, with you guys, with the students, with people applying, with people already in medical school, with people outside of medical school, just because both me and him have tried to do lot of different things. We've succeeded in a lot of different things, especially the interview prep, exactly what you said. I got interviewed for, when I was applying to the Navy, I got interviewed for my MBA school. I got interviewed for scholarships for medical school. Um, that definitely helps with, if you're asking like, oh yeah, why choose us, or like why even listen to us, is because we've been doing this for quite some time now. But another thing, I also feel like, I mean, just looking at you, you've had a pretty interesting like life, Adish. Like you've been moving all over the place.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's like it's kind of I like what you said about like, you know, we have had different paths, obviously, but it's kind of like led up to the same, I guess, like this is like getting to a culmination and just one conclusion of a bunch of them eventually, like we have residency, and after residency is fellowship, after fellowship you're an attending, after attending you're like, okay, what do I do? Do I want to do inpatient? Do I do outpatient? But
Yeah.
like at this point it's all kind of led to this point now where it's like, oh yeah, we're both getting master's degrees. We both, went to this 6-year program. And I think that's pretty unique. And it's like, I mean, not many people get to say they've got to do that, which I think is pretty cool. And, if
Yeah.
anyone has questions or whatever, it's kind of why me and Adish want to start talking about this, because we want to give insight to like, hey, we didn't choose the exact, I mean, starting from the beginning, me and Adish, I feel like forget that just doing the 6-year program in and of itself is, completely different from the rest of the United States, like literally, because it's the
Yeah, for
only
sure.
one.
Yeah, yeah. Now for
And then
specifically,
yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, doing all these extra things, like we think we're non-traditional just because I feel like a lot of the time I'm like, oh yeah, I'm non-traditional because like I'm getting a master's in business as well as doing this. But dude, we're like non-traditional from the beginning. Like from the get-go, it's like, oh yeah, you do something different. And so,
yeah, yeah,
but that being said, also, we've helped so many students who also, went from undergrad, applied to medical school. Like literally, like I said, that first student I helped went through the traditional route and was able to get into that program.
yeah.
Um,
And I
it's not
think
an accelerated program; it's still 4 and 4. So,
yeah. And I think that's an important point you bring up there. Just like we can help, like, we're not experts just at like 6-year med, although we are like obviously most of our clients do come from trying to apply to UMKC, but we're able to help people with any type of interview. We know a lot about interview structure in terms of like multiple mini interviews or just like a
mhm,
casual
the
one-on-one
traditional
interview.
interview.
We've both
Mhm,
done both. So it's really, and a lot of the same principles kind of apply, except in a longer interview some of them are different, which we'll probably publish YouTube videos in the future kind of about those differences and how to prepare for those. But just kind of to show that we've done a lot of interviews, we've applied to a lot of things, we've gotten into a lot of things, you know.
mhm,
So it's just to say that essentially we kind of understand how the interview process works. And I think a lot of people say that, but then don't have the backing that we do in that you can there's a lot of people who can, for example, get a perfect score in the ACT, but teaching
mhm.
somebody to get a perfect score on the ACT and getting a perfect score on the ACT are two totally different things.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
our
Absolutely.
MedProPrep, I mean, our record is pretty good in terms of pretty much everyone. I mean, actually everyone has gotten into med school. We haven't had one applicant that hasn't
Yeah.
gotten to the school. And honestly, usually it's their first choice that they get into. So
Yeah, I think you're right. Like we
yeah,
haven't had, I think every person who we've gotten in has gotten their first choice. Actually, that might be true.
yeah,
Um but yeah, like, I just kind of want to like wrap things up with one more thing. I was gonna
yeah.
ask you this question. I prepared it, but like if you could give and I'll answer this too, but if you could give one piece of advice to someone applying to med school right now, what would it be?
Yeah, I think I think the biggest advice for me, if you're, because right now we're kind of in the middle of, we're like the end of November, so to say, coming into December. A lot of your applications are probably sent out. I think the
Mhm.
biggest thing that you can do to make yourself a better applicant is just be confident. I think at this point, your application sent in, you've done all the steps. There's no point in harassing yourself and beating yourself up over like what schools am I going to get to and everything like that. I would just say you've done all the hard work, be confident in yourself and start preparing early, I guess is the biggest thing for the interview because
Mhm.
I think a lot of people just think like there's no prep needed or you don't need to do anything. And
Mhm.
that might be true for some people, but why wouldn't you want to increase your chances? Like why would, if you had a 50% chance of getting in, why don't you increase that to like 75 or even
75.
100% by
Mhm.
coming to us? And like, we can even have just like a short conversation, but I think getting ready early is always helpful and making sure to be confident.
Yeah,
What about
absolutely.
you?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice that I tell every single one of my students is not just like what you're going off of, like just saying like be you, but also just like talk about talk about your stories, talk about what you've gone through, talk about the most interesting thing to the people interviewing you and the people who are going to be talking to you, even in the future in medicine, and this kind of goes for human behavior, period, is give people stories. Tell them what's going on in your life. Tell them what you've gone through. Tell them, what led up to this moment.
Hmm.
I don't want to just hear like, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor. That's it. And that's my motivation
Yeah,
because
that's not good enough.
yeah, that's not good. It's not just about that's not good enough, but like you have to truly find your reason for what makes you want to do this, because it can't just be that, someone told me about it. It's being driven by financial gain. It's being driven by, ego gain or,
Yeah,
societal gain. You have to have it within. We always talk about this, especially me and all my, all our friends, about
yeah,
kind of like having that inner drive or like having that dog in you. But like you really do have to have that to get through medical school and have that inner thing and have the stories and have, that inner drive and find out what that makes you. Because, what I try to get out of all my students is like, okay, I want you to tell me one thing about you that makes you happy or makes you the most proud out of anything else. And for some students it has literally nothing to do with medicine. So, and I love, and a lot of the times that's even the most interesting
more
stories.
interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, because they
yeah,
hear a lot of
exactly.
medicine. Yeah,
Exactly. But yeah,
yeah,
that's what I would tell students is just, talk about yourself and talk about your stories for sure that make you you. So
yeah. Well,
yeah, thanks everyone for
yeah.
listening.
Thank you
Welcome
guys.
to our podcast and our YouTube channel. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at MedProPrep. Hopefully we'll be starting a TikTok soon. I'm
Yeah,
not sure. Nisha's gonna be working on that. Also, and check out for our YouTube shorts. But if you want to share this page, leave a like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you soon. Thanks for listening.
thank you guys.